Welcome to another episode of What to Say and How to Say It. I'm Nina Rosner, and I'm here with Kyle Hargrove, our favorite licensed professional counselor. Today, we're going to be talking about, a painful topic, when you've lost respect for your spouse. That is a sad reality for a lot of us. And respect is key to healthy, whole, forward-moving relationships that can grow and bring glory to God. So we want to dive into this because if you don't have respect for your spouse, guess what? You're not mirroring, you're not reflecting the glory of God in your behavior. And yeah, you probably have a really good reason for that. Like, no joke. Maybe they're not living up to what they were doing. Maybe they're doing stuff that's damaging to the relationship. We'll talk through all of those things today. And hopefully you'll emerge with something you can use to level up in this space, because the way we treat others communicates God's love for this world, not just how we feel about him, but how he feels about everyone. So let's dig into this. So when
preach, girl.
Sorry, I need to get off that soapbox, but it's a thing. I mean, you've seen, I'm sure, without disclosing names and details, but you've seen clients of yours that have lost respect for each other. And it is like, there's some key things that are like signs of that. What does it look like? Like, let's do a little test here. What are some of the key things that you see when respect is kind of flown the coop, if you will?
Well, one of the first things I see, and thanks again for having me. I probably should start with that. But one of the things I see probably most prevalently, that is one of the first things, is the loss of intimacy. That appears to be one of the first items that gets affected when respect starts going down the tubes. It doesn't matter if that loss of respect is grounded or not. Mm. But, and I'm talking about any level of intimacy, including physical intimacy and on to sex. Those aspects of a marriage begin to be affected far earlier than other ones. People can play the game. They can walk along and bury their heads in the sand like nothing has happened and pretend to be normal in most ways for a long time. But intimacy is one that gets affected post haste.
Mm. Yeah, that reflects our heart towards that other person in a huge, huge way.
Yeah. Well, and it reveals, also not just reflect, it reveals, I think, about it reveals our thoughts and our ideas about intimacy and about what that means to us and whether it's even important beyond sex. Because for some people, when they hear the word intimacy, that's the only thing that comes to their mind.
Right.
They don't reckon. I'm gonna throw shade on the guys here today, because I think that's probably more of a man thing than it is a woman thing, to lump all intimacy into either what happens in the bedroom or what leads to happening in the bedroom. Mm. And that's just not the case. There are dozens of levels of intimacy and types of intimacy that we get to experience with our wives. And if we're not even cognizant of them, then everybody's missing out.
Yeah, that is so true. I mean, don't we just like the knowing, that's the biblical word for physical intimacy, right? The knowing implies that there's a relational knowing that occurs as well. And I see a lot of people that are like, well, I'm just not going to tell him because I know how he's going to respond. Yeah. I'm not going to. Yeah. And maybe you do because you've got some history there, but boy, you're setting your spouse up for failure right out of the gate. And you're saying God doesn't change people. So
exactly,
that emotional intimacy on the decline. I'm not going to share this with you. That's a red flag for sure, along with the physical.
Yeah. There are a lot of secrets that start being kept. Oof. When intimacy is damaged. Mm-hmm. Trust becomes an issue. And here's the funny thing about, not funny, here's the ironic thing about that. Let me get my verbiage correct. the ironic thing about that is someone can lose complete trust in their spouse, even though their spouse did nothing to be untrustworthy.
Isn't that interesting? So talk more about that. What's that all about?
I think the erosion of the respect is where this comes from. And when you don't respect someone anymore or at all or ever did, it is difficult to be vulnerable to them. And trusting someone requires vulnerability. Mm-hmm. The fastest way for someone to be untrustworthy is for you and I not to trust them.
Yeah, it's like the CIA agent that says, show me the man, I'll show you the crime.
Yeah.
There's always something for that.
Right. But if we don't provide them the opportunity to be successful and trustworthy, then they remain untrustworthy. Mm-hmm. And so we're creating that scenario right up here, and then we're playing it out with someone's life. And that's kind of scary, and it's very much unfair, because we all make mistakes. We all do things that cause problems for other people. Mm-hmm. And, let me give you an example. My wife was out of town last week, and it was my responsibility to greet our guests at our bed and breakfast. That's not my normal responsibility, although I take part in it when I'm here. Mm-hmm. And I was out in town gallivanting around, and yes, I saw something shiny and I chased it. And when I did, my mind got on something completely different. Mm-hmm. And I paid no attention to the time until I got a call from my wife, who is hours away, asking me, "Where are you?"
Oh, no.
Ugh. And with the tone of her voice when she asked that question told me, "Dude, you're in trouble." Mm. And it didn't even register for me at that moment why I was in trouble, but then she was quick to explain it to me. And yeah. So anyhow, I get back to the house. Everything works out fine. But I know that what's happening in my wife's mind as she's out of town is, guess I can never go out of town again, because I'm not sure I can trust Kyle to be there to do the thing I asked him to do. Yeah, I got one job. So it's, just something simple like that, but more significant, I think, in the lives of people who are already struggling, is going to erode that trust. Mm-hmm. And cause somebody to doubt whether they can put that individual in that position of accountability and responsibility again. Mm-hmm. Obviously, things much larger than that. Of course, if I did that over and over, it might become a larger issue.
Well, yeah. Yeah. And, this makes me think of expectations. And I'm not saying your wife's expectation was unreasonable. Like, you had a job to do. That's reasonable, right? Yeah. And I don't know, dude, alarms on your phone. That's the only way I can survive. Like, oh, I'm supposed to be somewhere, like that kind of thing.
I wrote it down, but it didn't yell at me when it was time.
So. Well, see, and I need something to yell at me. So I doing something new, man, I get you. That's a thing for sure. But her expectations were probably fine in that, like, I asked you to do this thing, but sometimes our lack of respect for somebody comes from unreasonable expectations.
Yes.
So the more television that I watch, let's say that I'm feeding myself a bunch of romantic movies or, TV series where the spouse is perfect in whatever way that means, right? For men, it might be Stepford Wives. Like, I don't know, but
you mean the Hallmark Channel can be bad?
Hello, don't get me started on that. Like, don't read it, don't watch it. It ruins your life because it's TV. It's not real, right? Sorry.
Not everything that glitters is gold.
Well, exactly. It's all made up. And I think it's designed by the enemy to make us want something that's super not normal and consistent.
Yeah.
I mean, I've married a great man, but he's not perfect, right? And he would probably say the same thing about me, except I'm not a man. There's that. But the point is that when we have these expectations and then somebody doesn't meet them, we start to lose respect for them because we have this comparison thing we're doing. And I think that slides out in our communication with people. We start interrupting them, or we, or do the side glance and eye roll, or the left cheek, corner of your mouth when it really, and we have these thoughts of contempt, which then get verbalized as really, well, that was smart of you. Stupid, sarcastic comments that are so cutting and disrespectful. And I don't think women, so you've beaten up on men, I'm going to say I don't think women understand just how much that hurts. And their dude is usually not going to show them. But I hear from men just how brutal that is. We are then putting ourselves in this place of their mother, and they're 7, and we don't want to be seen like that. Like, no. So ladies, let's level up and let's have the teaching of kindness on our tongues in that space.
Well, in the Eric Burns model, transactional analysis, the communication model has the 3 ego states: the parent, the adult, and the child.
Yeah.
And what you're describing right there is a prototypical critical parent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the wife in the situation you're describing,
speaking
down to the husband as if he were a child.
Mm-hmm.
And in Burns' theory suggests that people respond as they are treated.
Yes.
Okay. So marriages where one spouse speaks to other as if they were their parent, and the other spouse responds as based on what they remember as a child, that's not healthy.
No.
That's a breeding ground for contempt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think disrespect is tied very closely to contempt.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's really a challenging thing, because the normal way that we respond to that is in kind. I'm going to be snarky to me, I'm going to be snarky to you. Well, you yesterday, blah, 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 whatever. No, how about hey, are you okay? It's not like you to speak to me like that.
Yeah.
What's going on? Let's call him to a higher level of being. And let's make sure that we're not sinking to that as well. If you live with somebody who's critical, don't become that, because that's common too. Not useful.
Exactly. One of the big things that stands out to me when we're talking about not respecting our spouse is, and I've seen this countless times, and that is that the expectations that we had for one another when we started the journey don't pan out like we thought.
Right.
And I'm not saying that there are not elements of behavior within that may warrant, I'm not going to go as far as to say contempt, but concerns and questions. But let me give you an example. A young couple gets married. They've completed college. They both have excellent degrees and excellent prospects. And the wife goes to work in the corporate world and climbs the ladder and does the things and gets the promotions. And the next thing you know, she's the best thing since sliced bread in that industry. The husband has a different idea about his career trajectory, although it's a good one, and it has grand expectations. And they both are supportive of one another in what they're doing. And he is more entrepreneurial. And he starts a business, and it's a successful business, and it goes great. And then the economy tanks, as does his business, which is dependent on discretionary income.
Yeah.
And then his career has a glitch. And although he reaches for and stretches to do anything and everything that he can to recover from this, never really gets back on track. And the next thing you know, she's making 5 times as much as he is. And to her, he's a disappointment. To her, It's not a matter of saying it's not fair that I have to carry the water here financially, but it's like, you had a lot of potential at one time, and I'm just wondering what happened to it. And
I kind of want to slap this person.
yeah,
That's just terrible.
but this happens
It
all
does.
the
It does.
time.
It does, especially if they have kids. And women are wired to, do the emotional heavy lifting, with
Yeah,
the relationships with the kids, like whether you're working or not. That's just how it is. And we're wired by God to be nurturers, right?
yeah,
So when you're in that situation, it is really hard. You have to guard your heart against resentment and take your thoughts captive big time to not
right.
end up in what you just said. Because when
Well, and
you're
we have,
living and doing it, it's hard. Go ahead.
yeah, no, when we have so many of us who are saying, you know what, the traditional expectations of husband and wife from the cave era, they shouldn't apply anymore. We're a more modern, a freer society, and we shouldn't be bound to those traditional expectations. Well, then when those expectations shift, and okay, so the wife has the corporate job, brings in buku dinero, and the husband is struggling, but she still has in her mind he's the one that should be leading the charge.
Yeah. Oh, man. Right.
You can't have it both ways.
Yeah. That's so
And
true.
and to think that life is static and that there won't be any changes or bumps in the road or unexpected and sometimes completely unforeseen circumstances that throw off our trajectory, to think that's not going to happen is naive. Our lives are dynamic and they change in microscopic ways every day.
Mm-hmm.
From the way that think changes are happening every day, sometimes things we don't even see or know about that are going to affect us tomorrow
Mm-hmm.
or the week after. And so we're not nearly as in control of this as we may think we are.
Yeah. And, it makes me think of feminism. And, it was so frustrating, I think, because a lot of the feminist movement, you hear people talking about this and they're really concerned about the C-suite jobs. And it's like, do you understand what is necessary to give up to sit in that one seat running a company or, being the CFO or whatever it is? Like there's a few number of seats for that, right? And it has to be
Right.
your life, right? It takes over. And I love the CEO of Pepsi Cola about 10 years ago. She said, you can't really do both well. You can't really be a CEO great and then raise your children well. Like there's sacrifices. And at the end of the day, you feel like you're laying somebody down. That's just the existence. And you don't hear, I sound like I'm betraying my gender, but the truth is that you don't hear women demanding that there be more female bricklayers or more equality in prisons. And the rejection of the fact that men and women are different is really, really sad. And we're seeing it at its extreme in our culture, as if it's just something to be taken off like a shirt. And we're learning that it's not.
Yeah.
But what's cool is that, we've been given this incredible privilege, both genders, sexes, whatever your current political term is, I'm
Our
sorry, I'm about biology.
vocabulary. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm about biology today. So I think there's two, male, female at the end. And doesn't, and I put on Twitter the other day, well, X, whatever it is, just because you're not super feminine or super masculine doesn't mean you're gay either. Like
Exactly.
there's a spectrum of masculine and feminine and there's strengths that are a little bit different. But boy, we look at what's going on in the world today, and ladies, if you're not looking for masculine men right now, I mean, come on. You may not see it yet, but when we start seeing terrorism on our soil, it's not going to matter what you do for a living. You're going to wonder if your children are safe. And I think walking away from roles the way that we have, and I'm not a big roles person because I've worked my whole life. like 13 years old. I've been working. I worked part-time when my children were little, but I also homeschooled them. And I think that's biblical. Proverbs 31 woman, she worked, she and her kids called her blessed. Like she knew these people and they knew her, but she was doing things. I think she made intelligent choices about what she did with her time and for work that included her kids, included her family, because she knew them and she was highly regarded by all of them. There wasn't some 20-year-old going, you weren't there at my games. You weren't with me. Not that they had them. Like, I don't know what they had back then, but you know what I'm saying? Like she had relationship with these people and you got to be there for that. You can't have all this. You can't have all of it. Not at the same time.
Yeah. Well, we've worked ourselves into a frenzy, I think, just in terms of the expectations we have of ourselves and the things that we allow as parents. We've allowed our children to get too busy. Mm-hmm. We've allowed ourselves to have too many responsibilities. And that's one of the things I'm facing right now is, a person that's just entered his 60s having to come to grips with the fact that there's a limit. I can't just keep adding things and go. That there's a limit to what I can bear and what I can accommodate, both mentally and physically. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping it's not a matter of slowing down. It's just a matter of I hit the limit, and this just happened to be the time that it happened, right?
Yeah.
So It's not a matter of aging, not that. But you're right. I think we want it all.
Well, we're taught,
and we expect it all.
Yeah, and it's so way to circle back to the expectation thing. I would love to see our culture. And this is going to sound horrible to a lot of people. I'm going to tick a whole bunch of people off right now, but I would love to see our culture living off of one income. And I'm not saying I don't want women to work. Go to college, get your degree, use your brain, do things, be creative, be with your kids though too. Do both in a way that doesn't cause everybody so much stress and anxiety, right? And live with less. Like we don't need to look like a Pinterest board.
No, we don't.
Our kids don't need to look like that. Our houses don't. We don't need most of what we have. We don't. And so settling into enjoying, having joy I think that's a great frontal assault to contempt, is being content and grateful for what we do have. If you got a pot with a plant in it and life in your home, even if you have a dog, if you have a cat, if you have something breathing life into you, a person in your life, you are blessed.
You are.
And so do we want to see that? And when we forget how we're blessed we are and what a blessing this other person is, that's when we start experiencing disrespect in our relationship.
Yeah. And I think disrespect also comes sometimes, it's amazing that you brought that up. It comes sometimes when other areas of our life are lacking and we have to have a place to put this stuff. Mm. Okay. And I think one of the lacking things in life at times is joy. And when I lose my joy, it sours so many other things around me. Mm. And it causes me to look at them joylessly. Is there a joyless or joylessly or
something like that?
Okay. Without joy.
Yeah.
And when I look at things that way, they look completely different to me. Mm-hmm. So the biggest thief of joy is comparison.
Yeah.
And why do we have to have everything? Because somebody else does. Because other people just like us have that, so I have to have it too. Mm-hmm. And when we get too stressed and come to the point and have this, come to Jesus meeting and a face to face with our spouse and say, I really think we need to simplify our lives. And yes, I agree too. Okay, what do you want to give up? What do you want to give up? It's great in theory.
Yeah,
simplifying our lives and slowing down and stopping to smell the roses and all that. It's great in theory. But we have to sacrifice. And is it really a sacrifice? I don't know. We have to give up things.
Oh man.
We have to give up
Yeah.
things in order to simplify our lives. We have to give up activity sometimes because we have so much activity in our life that produces nothing.
Yep.
And it wears us thin.
I think margin is huge. Margin in terms of actual physical space that doesn't have stuff in it.
Yeah.
And then margin of time, because then we can be on God's agenda and on mission for him, what he has planned for us. And we can also take care of ourselves. Like I think part of the reasons that disrespect climbs into a relationship is that we don't respect ourselves either.
Hello? Anybody home?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yes.
So I have a friend who's I see her a couple times a month, and she's struggling with investing in herself. She's like, I see her at the bar and she's like, I'm always so glad when I get here. And this is so hard because I feel like I'm, shortchanging somebody because she's leaving her kids, to come do this. And I said to her, I said, you are the most important person you have to take care of. And if this feeds your soul, you definitely need to do it. You're teaching your kids that they matter because
Yeah.
you're showing them that you matter to you. And you know what? A couple hours a month is not a huge deal. Good for you. Just like, okay, I'm going to ask you to remind me of that next time I see you. So, and it is, but I think it matters. But when we don't respect ourselves, when we betray ourselves, when we say yes to too many things or time commitments, we're betraying ourselves, and then we lose our identity, and then the world is telling us who we are. And that is a bad place to get into.
You are not wrong about that.
So any other ways you see disrespect climbing into a relationship, or ways we lose respect for our partner?
I like what you said a while ago about one of the the reasons we start to disrespect our partners because we lack respect for ourselves, and casting our own feelings out to those around us is a common
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
It's a very, I'm going to call it a normal thing because it happens so often. I don't think it's a positive or a healthy thing at all.
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to take accountability, personal accountability for myself, and to admit that I don't respect myself
Yeah.
is a hard thing to do. It is so much easier to take the contempt that I feel for me and throw it onto somebody else.
Yep.
And so many things that make us better people, that make us mirror God's character even better, are not in our DNA.
Mm-hmm.
They're not natural for us. The natural thing is to take care of ourselves, to be selfish, to be egocentric. And so many of the things that reveal God's character are others centered.
Mm-hmm.
and and don't necessarily toe the line with what culture and society tells us that we have to be and have to do and have to have. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not. I just think there's so much deflection and so much casting our own feelings about ourselves onto others because we just can't come to the place where we can admit that maybe we just don't like ourselves that much. Maybe we consider ourselves to be a disappointment and a failure.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to accommodate those feelings, we have to assign them to someone else.
Well, and I love that you brought this up, because the rescue for that is to take responsibility. And as painful as that sounds, I am living proof that, and I work with hundreds of people, that that's their way out.
Yeah.
I just want to put a plug in here for our Strength and Dignity course. So if you go to greaterimpactwives.org, or if you're interested in our couples work, greaterimpactcouples.org, you can learn more about this stuff there. We have a free ebook for you. You do not have to stay stuck in that, because when we take personal responsibility, you're no longer sitting in a victim seat. And then you can, are you a respectful person? Right? Or is your respect, the character of God, dependent on your circumstances? Well, I think all of us want more Jesus more consistently on a daily basis in our lives.
Yeah.
So, Well, what's one thing you want to send our listeners home with today, Kyle?
Thousands in cash and prizes.
Okay, we don't have that, but
Okay.
something else, perhaps.
Don't give up on each other. Don't give up on each other. Just because expectations from the get-go are not being met now, years into the process, there are reasons for that. And to say, well, someone just wasn't, they just weren't what I expected. They just don't have the chutzpah or whatever it is you want to call it that I thought they would have. And they haven't accomplished and they haven't risen and they haven't achieved like they wanted to and said they would. And I expected them to, and now they're not. So, it's almost like now they become a throwaway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if we can be transparent with one another about these feelings, even feelings of self-loathing,
mm-hmm.
to say, regardless of what it looks like on the outside, on the inside, I despise myself.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of how you must feel, because life hasn't turned out like you expected it to in this one area.
Right.
I want to offer you grace and understanding and tenderness and compassion instead. But it's hard to do that when you don't love yourself.
Yeah.
So take a look inside and be honest about what's in there.
Mm.
And if you can't talk to your spouse about it initially or immediately, talk to somebody, talk to a therapist, talk to a friend. You don't have to reveal every detail of your existence. Just say, I'm struggling
mm-hmm.
with feelings that I'm having inside about me. And I feel like they're poisoning the relationships around me.
Wow. That's the cure for narcissism right there.
Yeah.
Like you just solve the world's biggest problems relationally. Like that's huge.
Oh, good. I'll go to the mailbox for my check right now.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. If people would take that advice, like it's huge. You have to be humble, that's so key. And, I love all those thoughts around that. And it is center, because if we can receive God's love, we can really receive it. It changes us, and we do not feel the way that you just described. So
Exactly.
I want to encourage our listeners in that direction. And if you're curious about what that looks like, go ahead and reach out. We have a free ebook for you at greaterimpact.org. You can learn more, sign up, and get some help along this journey. It's not an easy one, but don't give up. You're not alone. We're here for you too. Thanks so much, Kyle, for dropping by. This has been a great discussion today. Listeners, I hope it blessed you. Be sure to check out our next podcast episode or follow us here on YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe. We'll see you later.